Don King, a charter member of the Friends of Local History at the Niagara Falls Public Library. During the past few years, we have been speaking with longtime citizens of the Niagara Frontier on videotape who have provided an historical perspective of our past, the present, and a futuristic opinion on Niagara Falls and the area. These conversations can be viewed at the Niagara Falls Public Library as well as on regularly scheduled historic histories on Adelphia Channel 13's weekly shows. Since my last series of interviews, the world, our community, have dramatically been challenged, i.e. a terrorist attack on 9/11/02 in New York City, an international conflict that as we speak on June 16, 2003, is now a global military exercise affecting the entire world, a national economic scene that puts New York State in a major financial deficit, and the birth of a major tourist economic entertainment bonanza in Niagara Falls, namely the opening of Seneca Niagara, the first of its kind, a gaming casino in our city. Today, we are continuing these historical and entertaining chats with another chapter of Niagara's video histories. And I'm honored to have with me this afternoon former mayor and still mayor in my mind, James Galie.
Don, it's a great pleasure to be back here. I spent a lot of challenging but rewarding hours here at Adelphia, speaking to the people.
Well, the mayor was mayor of the city of Niagara Falls from 1996 to 2000. He's been a citizen of this community for many, many years, and he'll tell you how many years if he wants to. We're going to talk about the past, Jim, and where you went to school and some of your early childhood days. We're going to talk about your police career and your military career. And of course, we're going to talk about your term as mayor of the city of Niagara Falls. And then I'm going to let you talk about what you would do if you were the mayor today and the mayor of the future of the city of Niagara Falls. But let's begin, if you will, about your early childhood, what streets you grew up on, where you went to early elementary school, except I have a picture of you in Cleveland Avenue in kindergarten right here.
Well, actually, I was born, in my first infant years was on 17th Street off of Pine Avenue. I was born there, lived with my grandmother and grandfather.
The Boys Club wasn't even there then,
right up the street from where the Boys Club is presently.
Right.
I was born there. My grandmother and grandfather had a garden there. You know, the Italian people, that's the way it was. And those were my very infant years. Then we moved to North Avenue, actually the 1100 block between 13th Street and the Highland Avenue Bridge. And I was raised there till I was 14. Yes, I did go to Cleveland Avenue School, and when I talk about Cleveland Avenue School, that was really one of the premier, nice-looking grade schools at the time. They used to have a rock garden. I think it was on the 13th Street side, if you remember it. I remember because as a young child, I fell and I cut my head open back at that time, and I think my mom had to go to the Board of Education and actually made a complaint. But those days, you didn't sue. You just made a complaint, but I got my head stitched up.
So many people will not even know Cleveland Avenue School because now they're building new condominium apartments, I think, for
there's a
challenged
couple
people,
for challenged people being constructed at this time.
And of course, the sister school then was North Junior High School, and the same heating plant heated Cleveland Avenue School and North Junior.
Yes, and then I actually went to North Junior from Cleveland. I went for 2 years to North Junior. And I remember on my way to North, I used to stop at a little candy store. There was actually one on the corner of 16th, I think, in Cleveland, and there was another one next, like a home, it was more like a home store, and I used to buy little taffies on my way to North Junior. I went there 7th and 8th grade.
That was almost at the Triangle place corner. There was a store, too. I also went to North Junior, too. So you went to North Junior? After North Junior, what happened?
After North Junior, I went to Gaskell for 2 years. And then I actually worked on a power project, and from there I went, that was in 59. When it first started, I worked on, I got out of high school June of 59, worked a little bit. I think it was
But
early
you went to
60.
high school. You went from Gaskell to,
Niagara Falls
I thought maybe you skipped high school.
No, I went to Niagara Falls High School and graduated.
Okay.
Class of 1959.
Okay.
And from there I worked a little bit on a project. And then I went to the Marine Corps, and I was in the Marine Corps.
In 1959, about 1960?
1960, I went to the Marine Corps. In fact, I was aboard a ship. I was a seagoing bellhop, they called us in those days.
1960, the Korean War effort was...
No, it was after Korea and actually before Vietnam.
Right
so
in between.
Then I was in the Marine Corps. I was aboard an aircraft carrier. Then I come out of the Marine Corps, and shortly thereafter, well, I got married.
Okay, to Eva.
I got married to Eva. I met her actually on Pine Avenue in a restaurant at the time. That's when Sandra Dee was popular, and she reminded me of Sandra Dee, and I met her, fell in love, and 41 years later, we're still together.
That's terrific. I know you have children.
Yes, I do. I have 3 children and 5 grandchildren. And after we got married...
This was, you came out of the service.
Right. Got married to Eve in 1962.
Okay.
And then I worked at a finance company for about a year and a half. Then I became a police officer, following in my dad's footsteps.
Right. Your father had been a police officer for many years in this community.
When he retired, he had 35 years on the job. And he started in 1942 on the police department here in Niagara Falls. And then I joined January of 1965.
Okay.
And I remained on the police department for 31 years until I became mayor of the city of Niagara Falls.
Okay. And then in your police career, you started as a patrolman?
Yes, I did. And I first was a patrolman for, I think, 4 years. Then I was a detective. And in 1969, I was in a detective bureau. But I liked more of the action, and I loved the uniform, having been in the Marine Corps. And I loved to wear the uniform. So I actually asked out of the detective bureau. I had made a pretty good pinch along with another fella. They stuck up the aquarium, and we caught the culprits. There was 3 of them. But I asked the chief at the time, Fitzsimmons, out of the detective bureau because I enjoyed the uniform and actually put me back on the street.
The street meaning you don't remember any of the beats you had?
Oh, yeah. I was down Fall Street the majority of time and on the east side. You know, and actually... You know, let me back up just a second.
Sure.
When I asked out of the detective bureau, because I liked it was a little too quiet for me, and I liked the action, to respond to the calls. I asked Chief Fitzsimmons. He said, okay, because I really didn't want to go in. He asked me to go in and give it a try. Anyway, I did get the reassignment back to uniform, and the first day back in uniform, this was in January of 1970, they stuck up the aquarium, three suspects stuck up the aquarium with stocking masks and so forth, and my partner and myself at the time caught the 3 of them with everything, you know, the money and all. And the chief came to me and he said, you know, officer, I think you're right. You belong in uniform, not in the detective bureau.
Were these walking beats in those days, or were you in cars?
Well, I walked, but mainly in a car. I walked in the north end a little bit, and I walked down what was post 3, was down Fall Street, the old Riverway, and the old Fall Street, when it was really busy at the time. We used to have an area called the Barbary Coast, a lot of bars, and you'd go from bar to bar to bar to bar, you know, fight after fight.
We talked to some people that remember Nymphas and Stage Door. And
Stage Door, in fact, I see the fellow just died
today. I saw in the
Stage
paper.
Door Tony, we used to call him.
That's right.
Tony Pion,
right.
Tony Panessa. And, but all of those bars down there between actually Niagara Street and Buffalo Avenue on Main Street, where the Red Coach Inn, all the way up to, you know, all the way up to Niagara Street was loaded with bars.
It was a bustling area. It was a
hustle and
the
bustle.
2 theaters with the Strand and Cataract,
Yes,
and it was very busy. And you also started raising a family mostly when you were in the police force.
Right, and I advanced in the police department through the ranks. I studied my heart out civil service examinations, and I became a lieutenant in 1972. And then I became a captain on the police department in 1978. And I became an inspector on the police department in 1984, all civil service competitive. And the inspector's position was actually from 86 forward, the number 2 position. It's like the deputy chief today.
In looking at your resume, I also saw that during those periods you went to different schools, the FBI school.
I was fortunate. I attended the FBI National Academy and graduated out of their academy, and I think in our department maybe a total of maybe 15 or 16 officers have attended in the history of the Niagara Falls Police Department. And I think I was also the only officer to attend the Secret Service Academy.
Well, we're going to talk about your different careers, your political career, and of course in your law enforcement career, but let's talk a little bit about law enforcement today as compared to what it was when you were there. What are the major dramatic changes that have taken place?
Well, I think people were more respectful years ago. Even though we had our troubles during the racial periods in the 60s, mid-60s, early 70s, but people were still more respectful of the policemen. And we didn't have quite the problem they do today in the drug culture. You know, back then it was heroin, it was only in certain areas, where today this crack cocaine and different types of drugs, it's more prevalent not only in certain, you know, black areas, but even in some of the lot of white areas. It's no longer a black thing. It's across all lines. It's all, you know, people, whether low income or high income. And it's a problem.
The other thing we have to point out here is that when we talk about the racial, the demographics, today neighborhoods are not traditionally just one denomination or one race. They're all mingled today, and there's a lot of diversity.
Right, not anymore. I could remember years ago, you walk in a particular area, it was all Italian,
right.
Or it was all Irish, or all Armenian was very prevalent in Niagara Falls. It's altogether different today. The job is actually a lot tougher today. In a way, it's easier because you have rapid communications, radios and all that, but tougher today because there's a watchdog at every corner, there's someone with a camera or someone with a tape, and that's not to say there shouldn't be, but it's just the idea. You don't have the freedom to act in many instances. Policemen take a step backwards, and sometimes that can cost them their lives.
The other thing that's changed the way they do business, the police officers, they have to be computer smart.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
the computers are in their cars, and they have to know exactly all the electronic kinds of things that people might not associate with law enforcement.
When I first went on a job, you took one little report. It was about this big, maybe 10 by 10, filled it in how the weather was, how many calls you got. Today there's a report for everything, and you have to be specific because you never know when you're going to end up in court or some type of lawsuit. And that's the way it is today. And I have a lot of let's say expertise and knowledge on that even today because I have 3 kids on the police.
Well, we're going to talk about your children. And when talk about your children, what are they?
Right.
I know 3 of them are on the force? 2 of them.
Oh, actually, I say 3 because my son-in-law, who is actually my son in a sense now, my daughter's husband, he's a policeman also, so I have 3 of them.
Okay. Are they on beat? Are they detectives? Are they?
My 2 sons, Johnny, my youngest son is a narcotics detective, and he's been on for 14 years. My son Jimmy's a regular detective in the Bureau, and he was in narcotics, and he's out of that, and he's been on about 17 years. And my son-in-law, Franco, he's a traffic officer.
Jimmy helps us out, I guess, at the library once in a while. So
yes, he does.
I see him there. So your children have all followed your father's footsteps, your footsteps, and so
right. So you got to figure my wife and my daughter, Elaine, what they have to contend with, with all the policemen in the family. Even when I was there as an officer when also the 3 boys were on the job. There was actually 4 of us all serving at the same time.
So if somebody wanted to talk to Officer Galie, they might have trouble identifying who
which
they're going
one?
to talk to. That's exactly.
And that's the same if they wanted to make a complaint. We used to say, which one?
Okay, so now you're a veteran police officer. You were kind of a neophyte in the traditional political game, if you will. I don't know if you were ever a committeeman and went through all that.
Never involved in politics in my life. I supported particular candidates on occasion if I thought they supported my goals or the goals of the chief, who was very close to me, and he would stay as chief if this particular individual got elected or something. But other than that, I was never a politician.
So let's talk about the years 1994 and 1995. That's a year before you were elected, 2 years. Did you have the psych in your mind? Did you think about the community then? Did you think about this change, this major commitment you were going to try to make?
Well, I'll be honest. I loved being a policeman. I loved being out on the street. I walked for many, many years through my own choosing. I had parked a car, and especially being a boss, I could do that. With a walkie-talkie, if they needed me, they could send a car to pick me up. But I loved to be out in the public. And to be totally honest with you, Don, I had no inclination of being the mayor until probably September 1994.
Okay.
Okay.
So how do you prepare yourself for that?
Well, people approached me and they were looking for a new face at that time. That was a rumor anyway. Someone clean, and I more or less portrayed the All-American, having been a police officer in uniform. Everyone knew me, a veteran. And I started thinking about it. And I really one day went to a luncheon or dinner for Senator Nanula at Tacoma. I was just beginning to think about possibly running for office. And Tony Masiello at the time had left the senator's office, and he was now the mayor of Buffalo. And I talked to him for a minute, and I started thinking about it, and I said, why not? I says, I'll run, and if I win, I'm the mayor. If not, I'm still the police inspector. So that's when I really...
You start going to council meetings?
A little bit. But, you know, a number of people talked me into running for mayor, and I have no regrets by all means. And even though my wife was somewhat opposed.
Who were some of the important people in helping you make that decision? Do any of them come to mind?
Not really. You know what it was? Just a regular folk out on the street, without naming them. The everyday folk, the blue-collar worker who goes and grinds it out every day and says, you know, I think you'd make a great mayor, or you're out on the street with the people. You know what it's like to be out here in the field with the people. And I just started thinking about it. And no one person in particular.
Okay.
You know,
then people talk about the experiences prior to the election, the time prior to the election, and getting involved with the community. Of course, you knew the community, and you're always out in the community.
Right.
But you had to do things in preparation for the election. You had to be more visible than you were before. You had to make commitments. You had to take positions. You had to start developing statements in your mind and priorities in your mind and the kinds of things you were going to do. Did you pattern yourself after anybody else? Did you do any...
Well, you know, to be honest, I was sort of always, in the police department, I was a sort of, you know, disciplinarian. I was sort of straightforward and said it the way it was, even though, you know, I try to portray that image out there as far as neatness and all of that. And I just felt that maybe being the mayor, I could do some things I wanted to do in the community. And I seen some things in my, you know, 31 years as a police officer I felt were wrong out in the community. Some areas maybe that could be cleaned up. But I said one thing, and I was going to make the tough decisions, whether they set well with the right people or not. If I felt in my heart that this was the decision, I made the decision not to get reelected, but to make the right decision.
And one of the
and
areas,
if it happened,
I'm sorry to interrupt, one of the areas it was the deficit in the budget. I know that
there's
was
no question about it. I think I may have been the second mayor in history to have to reopen a budget. In March of 1996, my first year in office, there was a $6 million built-in deficit in the budget because of a refinancing scheme, more or less. And I opened the budget, and from that, and made some tough decisions that didn't set well with the unions.
Well, did you have a primary?
Yes, I did. I had a three-way primary with Carmen Morial and Tony Caranto.
Okay.
Okay. Now, Carmen was new to the game, and I was new to the game.
Well,
Carmen had run. He had been a board.
He was on the Board of Education, but he was a fireman.
No, well, he was a fireman,
right.
And then Tony Caranto was a veteran politician.
Right.
A lot of people, you know, told me at that time, really, some more astute politicians told me that, you know, I didn't have a prayer because it was too experienced, but I depended on my years out on the street, walking and talking all those years.
And then, of course, you won the primary.
I won the primary convincingly,
right.
But I still had to stay. Tony Caranto actually stayed on the line and run on the Liberal line, but he still garnered some votes.
So you were running against Caranto?
So I was running against Caranto, and at that time, Jake Palillo, who stayed on the Conservative line, and Barbara Girasitano was on the Republican line.
Right.
So I still had 4 into the general election, and like I say, I came out of it one pretty handily, to be honest.
It's ironic, all those people are still around this community.
Yeah, they're still around.
Staying around.
Yep.
That's terrific. Now let's talk, you get elected.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 1996. What are the first things that came into your mind then?
Well,
was for real. Now you were there.
I was there, and I had to make the decisions.
Okay.
You know, and naturally, I had a transition team. In fact, the school superintendent was part of the team, and you know, and Knuckles Bradley, and I chose some people to be on the team I thought could help me with some of the appointments. Naturally, some of the appointments come from the heart also. You know, there's certain people I felt I wanted to bring back, you know, certain people, departments I thought could, you know, either help train younger people, and it would be a positive.
And you trusted implicitly.
And I trusted them explicitly.
That's right.
And I made some of the decisions, and some of them didn't set well, you know, with some people. Again, you know, it's tough to make decisions in tough times. you're not going to make, when you have a lot of money, it's easy to run a ship.
Right.
Because there's no
That's right.
problems.
That's right. Can you remember the years, specifically 1996, 97, 98, 99? Can you remember the battles you faced?
Oh, I remember them all. I've always had a pretty good memory, and I had some,
Let's talk about
pretty
some
good
of
battles.
the major battles, and I'm going to ask you about some of the things that you want to take pride in and your accomplishments, and some of the things that, if you had to do it over again, you might have done them in a different way.
There's no question that certain things I might have done differently, and other things I would have done the same. And there was some battles, and early on, actually, when I proposed cutting, the fire department.
Because of the deficit.
Because of the deficit, I proposed cutting the fire department, and there had been 12 firemen hired just before I became the mayor, and so forth. And, I also cut police officers at the time, and it wasn't easy choosing to do that. I would have rather looked another way, but we just couldn't. The money is actually in public safety and so forth.
Do you remember the council people with you then at that time?
Yeah, at the time there was Vince Morello and Vincenello, Connie Lazinski, Guy Satil, Tony Caranto, and there's a seventh one, right. Ralph Aversa.
So you always had people that might have been looking for your job.
Well, to be honest with you, when you're a mayor, there's always people gunning for your job, and more so out of the council, because it's different than like being a school superintendent. Right. No one can aspire to that from the board, because most of the time they don't have the credentials.
That's right.
And it's a tough situation when a council member can run for mayor, or you got to remember now, when I was the mayor in my infancy, there was actually two people, well, actually, there was actually Guy Satil had run in a primary, once wanted to be the mayor.
Right.
And Tom never made it.
They all want to be mayors.
Tony Caranto
That's right.
run against me.
Right.
And then a couple years after, Barbara come on.
That's right.
And she, actually, I beat her and Tony. So it's tough working with people like that.
Yeah.
But, I'll tell you, I think the times were tough and some tough decisions had to be made. And really, if you want to know anything which was my Achilles heel, was probably cutting the unions, cutting the fire department.
And that was in your first few years, though, too. Also.
Oh, yeah, but it carried over actually from January or November of '96 when we announced the budget and the cuts all through my entire
right into the
3 years
for re-election, too.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And a lot of money was spent to defeat me in the primary.
That's right. So what are some of the other areas that you really take pride in, some of your accomplishments that you really want to make sure people understand?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, let me say the first thing, and I really take pride in it, and I think the proof is in the pudding, is actually privatization of sanitation. That was my doing. Naturally, I needed 4 votes, but I only got 3, and they couldn't override my veto, but we got privatization of sanitation and recycling, and it still exists today. It's much better. The city's better off today than it was 7 years ago when they had the city workforce picking up garbage. So that's really a plus. And it saved over $1 million a year to this day. That's one big thing. Another project that I take somewhat, interest in, that I had a little bit of part of, was the school. Naturally, the school board and the superintendent, and with the Wicks law and all of that, wanted the school, but when Carmen had come to me and wanted the school on city property, and at that time there were some political, even council members opposed to it, really opposed to it. I made a deal with Carmen. I went over out to the area. I looked at it. We sat down. We talked what would be good for the city, what would be good for the school district, and it sounded a win-win. In fact, I went to Albany with Carmen, and I think at that time Ron Sheasley and my city administrator, Tony Restaino, and we went to the Power Authority. We got money, and out of it came the new school, for whatever part I played. And it was a big part, because if the mayor is against it,
it was a major
the project doesn't work.
And the cooperation that we had from the community when we looked at Albany for the Wicks exemption,
exactly.
They saw the cooperation that we had with all the bargaining units and all the political forces in our area, and that's really what made it come into reality.
So here we have a school. Every time I ride by it, I know I played a hand, because again, If I was the mayor and I was adamant against it, at least on city property, it would have never been happened.
Okay.
The school district may have still been looking for a spot.
Well, the newspaper also was against it at that time.
And the newspaper, we had 2 or 3 council members against it. But I really, in a sense, laid the law down. While I was the mayor, I wanted it. The department heads all came to the table. And
It was a spirit of cooperation.
Spirit of cooperation. And the third thing really was casino gaming,
Okay.
Native American style. There was no one as outspoken publicly. In fact, I went on Adelphia Cable and did a program specifically about Native American casino gaming. I met with the Senecas a number of times. I met with the governor. I shook hands with the governor in '97 to more or less make the deal. Let's go forward for Native American gaming for Niagara Falls. I endorsed them, you know, and the Democrats got real mad at me specifically for Native American gaming. And before I left office in '99, actually, the Senecas voted to seek a compact with the state of New York. They were actually in negotiations. Now, had I been opposed to Native American gaming for the city of Niagara Falls while I was the mayor, Governor Pataki would have never even entered into a compact if the local mayor was opposed to it.
Are you saying then, was it an option? Could it have been state gaming at that time?
No, really, state, we were pursuing state, and the Niagara, or the Gambling Coalition was pursuing state. But it failed. It failed a couple times. I think it passed first legislature in '81, then it passed the first one in the mid-'90s or before I was there. But that really wasn't, it didn't look like it was ever going to pass. So I always proposed Native American gaming, very vocal, very outspoken. And like I say, when I shook hands with the governor and made the deal, then I did endorse him specifically for Native American gaming, cross lines and so forth. But here it is today. And I'm not taking anything away from Senator Maziar, who was actually at the meeting when I spoke to the governor in Albany, and I'm not taking anything away from anyone else, Francine Del Monte or anyone who worked to make it happen in the end. But in the beginning, that's all I'm saying. And there was times when the Gazette actually referred to me as Mayor Seneca, and what's he want to do, give the land over to the Senecas. And here we are today. I mean, it's a complete reverse, and everybody's, you know, patting the Senecas on the back, which in my opinion was the only way we were going to get it. And now at least it's a tool down there. It's not the answer for everything.
You said it then, it wasn't the total answer.
Absolutely.
You know.
I had myself and Tony Restaino went to 3 casinos in California specifically to look at Indian gaming. And when we came back, like I said, we had a show here. So I feel that that casino, and I played a big part in that casino.
Okay, so are there some areas of your decision-making areas? Oh my goodness! I better turn that off. This is a live show, so I'm just going to turn that off, and we're not going to talk. Okay, I'm sorry.
All right, that's okay.
You would have done differently. Anything you would have done differently?
Well, you know, I really tried to work. You know, I might have. Well, no, I can't say I'd have done it differently. My Achilles heel, no question, was proposing the cuts in the fire department. But in my heart, I felt the cuts were necessary. I might have...
I believe, and I'm going to interject, I believe, just knowing you, you just wanted to do the right thing, whether it worked politically or not. In your mind, you wanted to do what you thought was the right thing.
And Don, let me say this. I didn't, and I have nothing gained because I'm not seeking public office now or that I'm enjoying my retirement. But I really felt in my heart, when I made those moves and proposed those cuts, I checked all over the country. I checked with mayors. I went to many mayors' conferences, you know, while I was in office, and I followed up a lot of things to check on size of departments versus need and all that. So I made those cuts based on a lot of expertise. But again, when you buck the unions, more so here in the Northeast, you know, it's a tough thing to do. You know, you can't blame individuals for trying to protect their jobs. But again, you know, there's no question.
Collective bargaining and negotiations are a major challenge, but also when they work well, i.e. the PLA we had with the high school, the contract they had when they built the casino, when they work well.
They do work well.
But in an economic challenged community, such as Niagara Falls.
You know what's tough too is the Taylor law.
The Taylor law
And
is
sure, now I'm putting on my mayor's hat.
Yeah.
And I used to be on the other side. I was the president of the Captains and Lieutenants Association when I was on the police department. But the Taylor law sometimes gives certain employees, they know they have a lock on the job no matter what. And sometimes it puts them in a little different position when they're bargaining. And it's good in one way, but it's bad.
It's like tenure in schools.
It's like tenure in schools.
No, we know that too. We talk about where we're at today. I want to spend a little time on where we're at today and what's happened because of the world conflicts we have, because of the state deficit we're in, because of the demographics of our community. How do you read our community today? The challenges?
I think there's some tough times ahead. As much as I was a proponent for the gaming, and I see it down there now, it's going to take some time. People have to be patient. They have to be patient. It's going to take some time to build up that critical mass of people that are down there and away from the casino spending their money. And it's going to take time, it's going to take time to dress up the city. And I think it's very important, the next mayor, whoever that may be, they're going to have some challenges. It's not going to be all a cakewalk.
One of the areas that we both are concerned about, and of course myself on the Board of Education, and I took a strong position and still take it, is on residency, whereby in a perfect world I wouldn't worry about residency.
Right.
But until we have enough people to be able to pay the taxes necessary for infrastructure, i.e. police, fire, roads, whatever, someday I hope we don't have to have a residency.
Right. I believe myself in residency. However, because it's done so disproportionately or really not fair. Certain groups can live out, certain ones have to live in and so forth. If they ever do away with a residency law, then they should have something where you pay. If you don't live in a city, pay some type of tax. Payroll tax.
So
Absolutely.
That would be one of the
And that'll
solutions.
be the answer.
I would think so. On the other hand, one of the answers is going to be a metropolitan government, whether it's a county government or a whole metro western New York. Someday we're going to be in that area.
But when I went to the police academy back in 1965, 64, at that time they were talking about metropolitan police department. In fact, I had to do a thesis on metropolitan police departments. And here we are, 36 years, 37 years later, almost 38 years, and we're still no further forward.
Well, except the problems are becoming even more challenging. So I think we're going to have to get it out of the box and do some new things, and I'm sure you would agree. Let's talk about our infrastructure in our community now. Our young people you're lucky, all your kids are in the area.
I'm so fortunate. I have 3 children living here, working here, 5 grandchildren.
That's a blessing.
I have, access to, I can see them, and to think of the poor people, and there's so many amongst us that have to pick up the telephone on a holiday or maybe see their children and grandchildren once or twice a year. It's frightening to me because I know how fortunate I am.
What about the condition of New York State?
New York State is in tough shape. It really is. That's why you're even seeing going more and more to different fees here, fees for this, fees for that. More gambling all over the state's becoming more prevalent.
How do you reconcile, I have my feelings, but how about you? How do you reconcile the difference between Niagara Falls, Ontario and Niagara Falls, New York? And why the tremendous, you look at their skyline, and see what's going on.
Even in the last 7 years, since 97 or 6 years, what you see building over there.
Why does it happen there and it can't happen on our side?
Well, sometimes I don't want to go back to the old way that they have the view of the falls, where we have the falls where we can touch, and from that side they see the falls. But I think their government is a little
systemic.
A lot more. The money comes back into the province. And I think they're more rigid. And when I say rigid, they're government in a lot of ways.
We had people from Canada, developers, come over to our side.
Oh, yes.
I can name some of the people, I know them. After a couple of years, they went back.
Yes, you're right.
And there has to be something systemic in our government.
It is.
I process
I hate to say it, having been the mayor, but Niagara Falls has had a reputation for being tough to do business in.
Well, why? That's what I want to get at.
And it shouldn't be.
Why?
And it shouldn't be.
If there's anything that we can come out of
Sometimes there's too many conflicting stories, too many people that, I don't want to call it jealousy, but they don't want to see the other person or this person or that person get the credit for this or that. And in the end, it just creates nothing happening.
30, 40 years from now, when people look back at this tape, and they've always heard about Niagara Falls being that difficult place to operate or own a business, and I had one for 30-some years here.
Yeah, I remember
people
on Main Street
are going to look at this tape and say, you know, was he right? I mean,
yeah. I think people have gotten to get their act together, and I think they have to realize that what's going to happen in Niagara Falls, first of all, it won't happen the way it should if people don't work together, but it's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight. Sometimes impatient. People are so impatient, but it takes time. And let's give the Senecas the credit they deserve. They're doing a tremendous job down there. But again, it's tough to ask a private person to go invest their private dollars into something if they're not guaranteed to make a profit. Casinos guaranteed to make a profit.
Always,
wherever
they're
they
guaranteed. I'm going to ask you a tough question. Now, we're still where we're at now. We're not in the future.
Right.
Because in a few minutes, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you a wand and say you can do anything you want. What would you do to make Niagara Falls the place you'd like to see it be? The convention center. We talk about a place where people can have conventions. Do you think that place in the center? I walked downtown the other day, and I saw where they're talking about the future convention center.
Falls Street.
Fair there.
That was actually a Butler building. That's all it was.
So how do they talk about it? Why do we talk about things if it's not the right thing to do?
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes people act in haste just to do something for doing it, and that's the wrong way to do it. I don't think they're going to retrofit it or whatever they want to call it, rebuild it, add on to it, but it's still going to be a Butler building. I don't think really that's the place for it.
What's your feeling about the Winter Garden?
Well, actually, I took a lot of heat during my term as mayor. I actually believe, like an old fellow run a gas station, Julius Grandinetti, for years.
Well.
And I knew him. He used to, even as a police officer, he used to want that out of there. And I tended to agree, move it, it doesn't belong there. It belongs somewhere, but not there. Even at the state park, the entrance somewhere, somehow, but not there. It blocks what was the old Fall Street.
Okay, future of Main Street.
Future of Main Street. Main Street's going to take some time. I'd like to see it like in Allentown, in the Buffalo area, little shops, but it's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think it can happen. But it's going to be years away. It really is.
You know, I appreciate your candidness and your honesty, and I think people who watch the show will too. Let's get to the point now that I'm going to make you this magic person. I'm going to give you a wand. Say, Mayor Galie, you can do whatever you want. What would you do to improve, to enhance, to make Niagara Falls the city that you'd like to see it be?
Well, if I had a magic wand, I would probably move the Winter Garden out of the way and move that so the developers could come down there and build and have that direct walkway or whatever you want to call it with shops and so forth to the falls. I would reinstitute the impact team that hasn't been in operation. And it's really not being political, but they did a tremendous job in the neighborhoods with the people cleaning up the various neighborhoods. And I would
some of the areas that I think about, and I'm sure when I mention this, you'll probably jump right on it. A conference center, a place where the train station, the bus station will all be one. A major place where trains could come into the city.
Yeah,
of Niagara
I
Falls.
would probably put it down in the south end.
A transportation center is what I'm getting at.
Over by where Nabisco is, somewhere in that area. That's where I'd put it. Even though there's talk about North Main Street and revitalizing. And you still got to be where the critical mass is.
And we have to be customer friendly.
You got to be absolutely. Customer friendly. And if I had that wand and all the money, I'd put policemen out in uniform walking the beats.
Okay.
That's one of the big deterrent to crime. And these block clubs could be a big part of all of that.
Would you develop the Parkway area from Buffalo Avenue, let's say, or from the Grand Island Bridge downtown and put condominiums and try to...
without a doubt. I met with Trump while I was the mayor. Actually, I had lunch with Trump in my office. And I said, Don, why don't you buy the whole North Main Street between Ontario all the way down to the Rainbow Bridge, going all the way up to wherever that street is. Knock down everything, turn it around, face the river, and build what you want to build. You know, except you can't build a casino naturally because it wasn't legal. I says, that's the future, you know. And I think when our town was industrial and so forth, really, now Canadians more or less more face the gorge than we do.
Yeah.
We've built everything facing, other than a few homes through there. But turn everything around, knock down Main Street, clear up everything, face the river, all the way down from Whirlpool down. Now you've got something.
You know, one of the areas, and I just was there last week, in the Whitewater Towers, let's say, in the Roble Towers.
Right.
And that's not even filled in. It's not 60% filled anymore.
No.
And when I talk to somebody that has an apartment on the top floor, and they can see the fireworks, and they can see the gorge, they can see the Whirlpool carriage that goes across.
Absolutely.
It's a wonderful view.
Could you picture that street all the way down
Yes.
with condos
Yes.
and even some maybe types of entertainment, but all the way down there with rooftops and so forth? I mean, there's a lot that can be done. It's going to take a lot of money, and it's going to take some time.
Yeah. Well, friends, I hope you've enjoyed this chapter of the Video Histories where we're talking to former Mayor James Galie, and I think you would all agree with me. It's sure a very imposing and a very difficult position to be mayor of a city, an urban city, but one would have to say about Mayor Galie that no matter whether he liked the things that took place when he was the mayor, that he was doing in his mind what he thought was the right thing. He never had to be ashamed of what he was doing. He could hold his head up high. And he came into an environment that he was not a traditional, if you will, the politician, as people kind of connotate with politicians. And, you know, politics is not a bad word.
No, it's really not.
Politics really is the act of getting things done. That's what Machiavelli said years ago.
Right.
But on the other hand, governmental politics kind of went down south.
You know, I don't regret 1 minute I was in office. I really don't. And probably had I not been the mayor, I'd still been on the police department.
Probably.
But the way I look at it, you know, after all of these years, I had a tremendous opportunity. I met with presidents. You know, I always kid about that. Who has the opportunity to sit and talk with presidents and so forth? Even though there was tough times, my whole career was a great career in public safety and as the mayor. So I started out shining shoes down on Riverway in Fall Street. I ended up the mayor of the greatest city in the world. Some tough times, but
I always remember you saying the greatest city in the world.
Absolutely,
all the time.
and it still is, in spite of it all. You know, I used to do a lot of weddings, and I'd be at the brink of the falls, and I'd be married to a beautiful young couple, and I'd be with a water and a sun, the June sun. There was nothing better than that in the world to really show you what this is all about. Not everyone has that jewel in their backyard like we have.
Friends, when you see...
The only thing, Don, let me just close
right.
with one thing. The thing better than all of that, though, is my family.
No
my wife, Eve, my daughter,
That's
Elaine,
terrific.
and the 3 boys and a grandkids.
I knew you'd want to say that. When
Absolutely.
You see Mayor Galie walking down Pine Avenue as he does today, just go up to him and introduce yourself to him, shake his hand and say, I'm glad you came our way, because I'm sure they feel that way. And on behalf of all the community and the citizens, we thank you for everything you've done for us.
My pleasure.
It's great to have you on.
Good to be here.
Thanks.